3 rifle shots crack straight up, into a white morning sky. The man lowers the barrel, turns his horse, and rides off, without looking back once. The woman sits there. Both wrists lashed to a stunted juniper. Riding skirt caked in red dust. A thin line of dried blood on her thumb, a cut, from that morning, from a page she was never meant to read. She doesn't cry. That's the strange part. Gold dust settles behind the bend. The mare beneath her stamps, snorts, hearing something she hasn't heard yet. A raven calls once. Then nothing. She leans down, sets her teeth against the knot, pulls. The rope doesn't give. She pulls harder. And deep in the red canyon, hoofbeats come echoing back, iron-shod, striking stone, coming fast. Not from the direction her husband rode. Celia Hale woke before the light did. That was the first thing. Always the first thing. Some women woke to birdsong, to a husband's hand, to the smell of coffee someone else made. Celia woke to silence. To the particular gray hush of a house, that had learned, over 6 years, not to make noise. She lay still a moment. Listening to Garrett breathe beside her. Slow. Even. Untroubled. A man who slept like the world owed him nothing, because he had already taken, from it everything he thought he needed. She rose without waking him. Bare feet on cold pine boards. No creak. She had trained herself out of creaking years ago, the way you train yourself out of anything, that might draw attention in a house, where attention rarely arrived kind. The kitchen was hers. The only room left, that still felt like it belonged to her, and not to him, not to his father, before him, not to the 18,000 acres, that wore the Hale name like a brand burned deep, into the land itself. She built the fire. Measured the flour. Watched the window shift, from black to iron gray to something almost pink, the way it did every morning, indifferent to whatever waited inside the day. 28 years old. She looked older in bad light. Fine lines starting at the eyes. Hands that had scrubbed, and kneaded and mended, until they had forgotten what soft ever felt like. Pretty once. Maybe. Garrett had said so, back when he still said things to her, that were not instructions. 6 years of marriage. 6 years of biscuits, and silence, and a bed, that felt wider every winter, as though the mattress itself were slowly giving up on the two of them ever meeting in the middle again. She had told herself it would change. It had not changed. The chickens fussed outside. Manuel would be up soon, feeding the horses, not meeting her eyes the way he had not met her eyes in longer than she wanted to count. Nobody met her eyes anymore. Not really. Not since the whispering started in town. Not since Doc Renner's visits turned, from once a year to once a month, each one arriving like a small funeral nobody had bothered to schedule properly. She heard the horse before she saw it. Fast. Too fast. Hooves cracking against hardpack like something urgent, something already broken, before it had even reached the yard. Celia set the pan down. Wiped hands that did not need wiping. Moved to the window, because that was what her body did now, when trouble came calling. It went still. It watched. The way prey watches. Dr. Renner. Reining in hard. Off the horse, before the animal had even fully stopped. He was a lean man. Gray at the temples. A face that had seen too much dying, and not enough saving, and it showed now in the way he carried himself, like a man bracing for a blow he already knew was coming, and had simply run out of ways to dodge. 3 visits in 1 month. This felt like a 4th. And a 4th felt like an ending. Garrett came out of the bedroom pulling suspenders, over his shoulders. Big man. Built like the land he owned, hard and sun-cracked and unmovable. He opened the door, before the doctor could knock. Renner. His voice flat as a closed ledger. Early. Wanted to catch you before the day started. Celia's stomach dropped somewhere near her boots. Coffee's on, she said. Her voice came out thin. Small. Like it belonged to someone standing very far away, and only borrowing her mouth to speak through. Appreciate it. But I'd rather. The doctor's throat worked. I'd rather just say what I came to say. Garrett crossed his arms. Then say it. Renner's eyes found Celia. Held there a beat too long. Mrs. Hale. You might want to sit. I'm fine standing. He nodded like he had expected that answer and did not like it any better for having expected it. I sent the last samples to a specialist in Tucson, he said. Got the wire back this morning. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. That presses on the chest like a hand. There's no easy way to say this, Renner said. The damage is permanent. You will not be able to carry a child. The coffee started to boil over. Celia heard it hiss against the stove. Did not move to stop it. Could not move at all, actually, because moving would mean this was real, and if she stood very still maybe it would stay a thing that was only almost happening, hovering just outside the edge of true. Damage, Garrett repeated. Like the word itself had personally offended him. Could be congenital. Could have been a fever years back, we can't say for certain. But the outcome is the same. Renner's voice gentled, just slightly. I'm sorry. Sorry. Garrett said it like he was testing the word for weaknesses. Sorry doesn't build a legacy, document. There are options, Renner pressed on, faster now, like a man trying to outrun something already gaining on him. Couples in your position sometimes consider. Get out. The doctor blinked. Excuse me? I said get out. Because that was Garrett. That was the whole of him, distilled down to 4 words. Not grief. Not even anger, not really. Just a door closing on a problem he no longer wished to look at, the way he might close a gate on a horse that had gone lame. Renner picked up his hat. Looked at Celia one last time, and she could not even nod back, could not do anything at all, but stand there, with her hands gripping the stove's edge, the metal hot enough to hurt, and she welcomed the hurt, because it was the only thing in that room that still made any sense to her. Then he was gone. Hoofbeats fading into the pink morning like nothing at all had happened here. The coffee kept boiling over. Flooding across the stovetop in slow black ribbons. Celia finally moved. Turned off the heat. Hands doing the work, while the rest of her seemed to stand somewhere outside her own body, watching from a distance she could not quite close. Well, Garrett said. That's that, then. She could not look at him. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't build a legacy, he said again, like repeating it might finally make it true. The words hit like an open palm across the face. She gripped the stove tighter. I didn't know. I never. 6 years. He cut her off clean, the way he cut everything off clean. 6 years I waited. You know what they say in town? They say Hale can't get a son off his own wife. His jaw worked. They say maybe the problem's not with you. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Then whose is it? He did not answer that. Just turned to the window. Stared out at his empire like it was the only thing in the room that had ever truly loved him back. Everything I built here, he said. Everything my father built. It needs someone to pass to. It needs sons. A pause, long enough to feel deliberate. That was the deal, Celia. That was the whole point of this. I didn't break on purpose. No. He turned back to her, and there was something in his face now that had not been there a minute before. Something already decided. I don't suppose you did. She spent the rest of that morning moving, through the house like a ghost rehearsing its own haunting. Because that was what grief did to a woman, she was learning. It did not knock you flat, not right away. It hollowed you out quiet, room by room, task by task, until you looked down, and realized you had swept the same patch of floor 4 times, without noticing you had done it even once. Until Garrett left for the north pasture, without a word. Until the house went, so silent she could hear her own pulse ticking in her ears like a clock counting down towards something she had no name for yet. Which was when she found herself standing outside his study. She had not meant to go in. That was the truth she would tell herself later, and it was even mostly true. She had only meant to dust the shelf by the door. Except the door was open a crack, and the ledger sat right there on the desk, right there in the slant of morning light, and some small mutinous part of her, the part that had spent 6 years being told nothing, asked nothing, trusted with nothing at all, that part of her pushed the door open the rest of the way. Columns of numbers. Dates. A name she did not recognize, some land office out of Prescott. And there, halfway down the page, in Garrett's own cramped hand. Hale dowry acreage. Transfer pending, CH status. CH, Celia Hale. She read it twice. 3 times. The letters did not rearrange themselves into anything kinder no matter how long she stared. Her father's land. The 40 acres, that had come, with her, all those years ago, the only thing in this marriage, that had ever, entirely, legally, been hers. Transfer pending. Pending on what? She did not know. Could not know, not from a single line in a ledger, not with her hands shaking the way they were shaking now. But something cold moved, through her chest all the same. Something that whispered, this isn't only about sons. This was never only about sons. She heard boots on the porch, and set the ledger down, so fast the corner caught her thumb, drew a thin bright line of blood she did not even feel. By the time Garrett came, through the door, she was back in the kitchen. Hands steady. Face arranged into the shape of a woman, who had seen nothing at all. She told herself she would ask him later. She never got the chance. He came to her again, that evening, and this time his face wore a decision the way other men wore a coat. Already fitted. Already comfortable on him, as though he had been trying it on for weeks in private, and had finally judged it ready to be seen. Get dressed, he said. Real clothes. Not that. Her heart gave one hard, uneven stutter. Where are we going? Does it matter? Garrett. Get dressed. She knew that tone. Knew better, after 6 years, than to push against it. So she went. Changed into riding clothes, with fingers that would not quite cooperate. She had not ridden since spring. He did not like her riding far. Said it was not proper. When she came back he was waiting, with a rifle across his arm. The rifle? Canyon country's dangerous. You know that. She did know that. And she also knew, with a sick, sliding certainty, that he had forbidden her, from that canyon country for 6 straight years, and now here he stood, offering to lead her, into it with his own 2 hands. I don't understand, she said. He did not answer. Just opened the door, and waited for her to follow. She followed. Because that was what 6 years had trained, into her, the way you train a horse to the bit, not through cruelty exactly, just through repetition, until following stopped feeling like a choice at all, and started feeling like breathing. They rode east in silence. The sun climbed. Turned everything to brass and old copper. Celia's mare kept an easy pace beside Garrett's gelding, and for one long stretch of road she let herself believe this was ordinary. A ride. Nothing more. Except the land started changing an hour out. Flat scrub giving way to red rock. Twisted formations rising up out of the earth like something frozen mid-scream. She had always thought them beautiful, in a lonely sort of way. Today they looked like teeth. Garrett. She tried again. Please. Tell me what we're doing out here. He reined in at the lip of a deep arroyo. Turned to look at her, and there was nothing in his face she recognized. Nothing of the man, who had courted her once, 6 years and a lifetime ago. I made a deal, he said. Cold spread through her chest, quick and total, like water finding every crack in old stone. What kind of deal? The kind that keeps my cattle from getting run off. Keeps my men from taking arrows in the back when they ride fence. He dismounted. Started loosening his horse's girth like this was any other errand on any other day. The tribes out here, they've been pushing hard this season. A lot of raids. A lot of loss on both sides. What does that have to do with? They wanted something for peace. His pale eyes found hers, and there was no apology in them. None at all. Something valuable. The world tilted, just slightly, the way it does right, before you understand something you already know. I gave them you. The words did not land right away. She heard them, understood each one on its own, but strung together they refused to make sense. Gave them you. Like she was a length of rope. A crate of ammunition. A thing with a price already stamped somewhere on it. You. Her voice cracked clean in half. What? There's a camp 3 miles north. They're expecting you. He pulled a small leather pouch from his saddlebag. Held it up like proof of something. This is for them. Payment. Proof of good faith. Her horse shifted beneath her, sensing what she could not, yet say out loud. Garrett, you can't. This is insane, you can't just. Can't I? He crossed to her horse. Took the bridle in one hand like she might bolt, like she was livestock, that needed handling. You're no use to me, Celia. Can't give me sons. Can't give me a legacy. His grip tightened. But you can give me peace. Keep the ranch safe. That's something. I'm your wife. You were supposed to be the mother of my sons. He started walking, pulling her horse north behind him, and she felt herself moving whether she willed it or not. Since you can't be that. You can be this. I'll leave, she said, desperate now, the panic finally finding her voice. Divorce me. I'll go east, you can remarry, find someone. Already arranged. The words landed flat. Casual. Brutal in exactly the way only casual things can be. Lila Prescott, he said. Young. Healthy. Her father runs the land office in Prescott. A pause that felt calculated, felt cruel on purpose. We'll be married by fall. Prescott. The name from the ledger. The land office. The name she had read, that morning with her thumb bleeding, onto the page. It was not a coincidence. Nothing about this man had ever been a coincidence. You've been planning this, she whispered. 4 weeks. Months. Waited for Renner's confirmation. But I knew before that. He kept walking. Kept pulling her forward like she weighed nothing at all. This is just cleaning up loose ends. She thought about jumping. Running. But running where? Into Red Rock, that stretched in every direction, into country she had never learned, because he had never once let her learn it? He led her, through a gap in the stone, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees in the shadow of it. Somewhere close, water trickled over rock. A sound so peaceful it felt obscene against what was happening. Listen, Garrett said, and there was something almost gentle in it now, which was somehow worse than the cruelty had been. You'll be fine. They need this peace, as much as I do. A beat. You might even be treated better than you'd be back east, living off charity, as a divorced woman. You're trading me like livestock. I'm making a hard choice. His jaw set. For the good of what I've built. Someday, when my sons run this ranch. There are no sons, she said. There's just you. Standing here. Doing this. That, finally, put something like a flicker of doubt behind his eyes. It did not stop him. He tied her horse's reins to a stunted juniper at the mouth of a wider canyon. Mounted his own horse without looking at her. I loved you, she said. Surprised, even now, to find it was still true, or had been once, buried somewhere under 6 years of silence. I know, he said. I'm sorry it couldn't be different. You're not sorry. No. A long pause. I suppose I'm not. He pulled the rifle. Fired 3 shots straight up, into the white morning sky, crack, 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 the sound enormous, obscene, swallowing the whole canyon whole. That's the signal, he said. They'll come for you now. Garrett. But he was already riding, dust kicking up gold behind him, and then the bend in the rock swallowed him too, and she was alone. Alone in a silence that had teeth. Celia sat very still on the mare, listening to her own heartbeat hammer against her ribs like something trying to get out. Think. Because if she did not think, she would start screaming, and screaming into empty canyon walls would do nothing, but scare the horse, and waste her breath. Think, Celia. You have a knife in your boot. You have hands. You have. She looked at the rope tying her to the juniper. Good, thick ranch rope. The kind Garrett used for breaking colts. Her fingers shook too hard to work the knot. Overhead, a raven called once. Circled. Went silent. And then. Hoofbeats. Not the soft, unshod rhythm she might have braced for. These were hard shod. Iron on stone. Fast. Reckless. Wrong, somehow, though she could not have said how she knew that, except that some animal part of her recognized danger the way it recognizes a snake in tall grass, before the eye ever finds it. 6 riders came around the bend. White men. Not Apache, she understood that instantly, in the half-second, before understanding turned to terror, because these men wore range coats gone gray, with trail dust, and one of them had a lawman star pinned crooked to his vest, tarnished, almost certainly stolen. The one in front grinned, when he saw her. A grin with half its teeth missing. Well now, he said. Would you look at that? Hale's woman, tied up pretty, as a Christmas goose. Celia's blood went to ice water. Because this was not Garrett's arrangement. This was not the peace he had traded her for. These were not warriors keeping some grim honor, with a rancher desperate to save his empire. These were outlaws. Wearing borrowed menace like a costume, using the fear of Apache country to cover whatever they actually meant to do to a woman alone, and tied to a tree 3 miles, from anyone who would hear her scream. Somebody paid good silver for you to end up out here, the lead rider said, swinging down off his horse. Question is. Does he need to know you made it there? Don't, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, which surprised her almost, as much as it seemed to surprise him. Whatever you're thinking. Don't. He laughed. Low. Ugly. She's giving orders. That's rich. He reached for the rope at her wrists. And that was the exact moment the canyon walls came alive. Later, much later, Celia would try to describe what happened next, and the words would never quite hold it. It happened too fast for words. It happened the way weather happens. Sudden. Total. Beyond arguing with. Because 1 second the outlaw's hand was closing around the rope, his breath sour, with old whiskey, and the next second an arrow took him, through the shoulder, and he was screaming, staggering back, and the canyon exploded with sound. Riders. Real riders this time, coming off the high rocks at a dead run, and Celia's mare reared hard enough to nearly throw her, and she clung to the pommel, with both bound hands, and thought, absurdly, distantly, I am going to die in this canyon, after all, just not the way I expected. Gunfire. Shouting in two languages tangled together. A horse screaming somewhere close. She saw one of the outlaws go down hard, thrown from his saddle by a rope loop that had caught him mid-run. Saw another will his horse to flee, and take a shot to the leg, that dropped him screaming, into the rocks. And then, silence did not come all at once. It came in pieces. The gunfire trailing off. The shouting dying down to low, urgent Apache she could not understand, but could feel the shape of orders, warnings, someone checking on someone else. Celia sat frozen on her horse. Wrists still bound. Heart still trying to beat its way out of her chest. One rider broke away from the others, and came toward her at a walk. Lean. Dark-haired, cut shorter than the others around him. A face that gave nothing away, not triumph, not curiosity, nothing she could read at all, except the eyes, which moved over her the way a man reads sign in the dirt. Fast. Thorough. Missing nothing. He reined in a few feet off. Did not dismount right away. Just looked at her, and looked at the rope on her wrists, and looked at the dead man bleeding out on the red stone a dozen feet away. "You're hurt?" he asked. His English was plain. Unaccented in a way that surprised her, though she would have been ashamed to say why it surprised her. "No," she managed. I don't think so." He swung down. Crossed to her horse, without hurry, though every line of him still carried the coiled readiness of a man who had just been in a fight, and had not fully stood down from it. Up close, he was younger than she had first thought. 30, maybe. A scar along his jaw, old and pale. He drew a knife. Celia flinched so hard the mare sidestepped beneath her. He stopped. Held the knife still. Let her see it was not coming for her throat. "For the rope," he said. Quiet. Like he was talking to a spooked animal, which, she thought distantly, was probably exactly what he was doing. She held out her wrists. The rope fell away in one clean stroke. Blood rushed back, into her hands, so fast it burned, and she gasped, and he caught her wrist, light, brief, just enough to steady her, before letting go entirely. "Those men," he said. "They were not sent by Ashki." "I know that now," she said. Her voice shook. "I didn't know it a minute ago." Something flickered at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. "Most whites don't know the difference between us and men like that. I'm starting to." He studied her a moment longer. Something assessing in it. Not unkind. Just careful, the way a man is careful around something he has not yet decided the shape of. "Your husband," he said. "He sent you here. Alone. With men like that riding free in this country." It was not quite a question. She answered it anyway. "My husband sent me here to die, one way or another. I don't think he cared much which way." The words came out steadier than she expected. Steadier than she felt saying them. And something about saying them out loud, finally, to a stranger, who owed her nothing, and had no reason to comfort her, something about that cracked a door open in her chest, that had been nailed shut for 6 years. He did not offer sympathy. Did not reach for her hand the way Renner might have, the way a gentler man might have. He simply nodded once, like she had confirmed something he already suspected about the world, and its cruelties, and turned to look back at his men, who were already dragging the wounded outlaws into a rough line, disarming them with brisk, efficient hands. "What's your name?" she asked, before she could stop herself. He glanced back at her. "Hawk," he said. One word. That was all he gave her. But something in the way he said it, flat, unadorned, no performance in it at all, told her more than a paragraph from anyone else would have. "I'm Celia," she said. "I know." His eyes went to the mare's flank, to the brand burned into the hide. "Hale." The name landed between them, heavy as a slammed door. "Not for much longer, I think," she said, and was startled to hear something almost like a laugh underneath the words. Bitter. But real. Hawk did not answer that. He turned instead, and gave a short order in Apache, and two of his men swung down, and began binding the surviving outlaw's hands, with the same rawhide cord that had, minutes ago, been around her own wrists. "We ride north," he told her. "To Ashkiai's camp. He will decide what happens next." "And if I don't want to go?" He looked at her then. Really looked, the way he had not quite let himself before. "You have another plan?" he asked. "Alone, on foot, in country like this, with men like those still breathing behind you?" She did not. She had nothing. No plan, no home to ride back to, no husband who wanted her, no land that was not already being quietly signed away in a ledger she had read, with a bleeding thumb that morning. "No," she admitted. "I don't." "Then you ride with us." It was not kindness, exactly, the way he said it. It was not cruelty either. It was simply a fact, laid out plain, as the canyon walls around them, and something about its plainness felt like the first honest thing anyone had said to her in longer than she could remember. He mounted his horse. Held out a hand for her mare's lead. She hesitated only a moment. Because what was there left to hesitate for? Garrett had already burned the bridge behind her, burned it so thoroughly there was not even smoke left to mark where it had stood. The only road forward was the one this stranger was pointing her down, into a canyon country she had been forbidden from seeing for 6 years, toward people she had been taught, since childhood, to fear. And yet some small, stubborn thing in her chest, the same thing that had pushed open Garrett's study door that morning, the same thing that had kept her spine straight while a stranger cut rope from her wrists, that thing leaned toward the unknown now instead of away from it. She passed him the lead. "All right," she said. "North, then." Hawk did not smile. But something in his face eased, just slightly, the way stone eases under the first thin crack of a freeze breaking apart. They rode out of the canyon together, past the line of bound outlaws, past the body still bleeding, into red stone, the sun climbing higher and hotter above them. Behind her lay everything she had known. A house. A name. A husband who had traded her like cattle for the sake of an empire built on sons that would never come. Ahead lay a camp she could not yet imagine, and a language she did not yet speak, and a man riding a length ahead of her, whose name was the only solid thing she had left to hold on to. Celia Hale did not look back. The camp came out of the canyon walls like something grown there instead of built. Celia saw it first, as smoke, thin gray columns rising against red stone, and then wickiups scattered among the rocks in a pattern that looked random, and almost certainly was not, and then people. Women pausing over cook fires. Children frozen mid-game. Elders looking up, from the shade, with eyes that did not blink. Every one of them turned to look at her. The silence had weight. She had felt silence like that before, in Garrett's kitchen, the morning Renner delivered his verdict, but this was different. That silence had been about her failure. This silence was about her arrival. About the fact of her. A white woman, riding in behind Hawk, wrists still raw, from rope that was not even his rope. She wanted to disappear. Wanted to fold herself down, into something small enough to slide between the rocks, and vanish entirely. She did not. Because there was nowhere left to disappear to. Because disappearing had never once worked for her, not in 6 years of trying it inside her own marriage, and it was not going to start working now. Hawk swung down first. Said something low to a tall woman, with silver threading, through dark braids, a face carved, from the same hard stone, as the canyon itself. The woman looked at Celia once. Briefly. Then turned and walked away, without a flicker of expression, and Celia understood, with a sinking certainty, that this was not a welcome. This was a verdict still pending. Hawk lifted her down. Her legs nearly folded under her, hours in the saddle, terror still humming, through her bones, and he steadied her, with one hand at her elbow, brief, businesslike, gone the instant she found her footing. "That is Ashki," he said, nodding toward a scarred man crossing the clearing toward them. Older. Deep-set eyes. A voice that carried without being raised. "He leads here." Ashki studied her the way a man studies whether he does not trust yet. Said something in Apache, sharp and quick, gesturing toward the dead outlaw's horse, toward the bound prisoners being led off toward the canyon mouth. Hawk answered. Back and forth, low and fast, words Celia could not follow, but could feel the shape of. An accounting. An explanation. Her whole ruined situation being laid out in a language that was not hers, by a man she had known for exactly 2 hours. Finally Ashki turned to her. Spoke in English, accented but clear. "Your husband traded you for peace." Not a question. A fact, stated flat, the way you would state the weather. "That was the arrangement," Celia said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Though I understand the men who found me first weren't part of it." Something moved behind Ashki's eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or its cousin, the kind that is not kind at all. "No," he agreed. "They were not." He turned and called out. A young woman emerged from a nearby wickiup, 18, maybe, quick dark eyes, a mouth already set in a permanent scowl, that looked like it had been earned rather than born with. "Ayana," Ashki said. "She speaks your language. She will show you what is expected." And that was the whole of Celia's introduction to the only home she had left. Ayana did not smile at her. Did not soften her voice the way you might for a lost child, or a wounded animal. "Come," she said, and turned, and walked, and left Celia to either follow or stand there looking foolish. Celia followed. The girl led her to a spring trickling out of the rocks, into a shallow pool, and gestured at the water, and then at Celia, with an expression that needed no translation at all. "Wash," Ayana said. "You smell like whites." Celia looked down at herself. Dust and sweat, and the ghost smell of rope burn. "I don't have anything else to wear." Ayana made a sound of pure disgust. Disappeared into a wickiup. Came back and threw a bundle of cloth at Celia's feet like she was disposing of trash. "Washington change. Then you work." "Work." The word landed strange in Celia's mouth. I don't understand what's happening. What do they want from me?" Ayana's eyes swept over her. Soft hands. Pale skin. Boots that had never once walked further than a porch. "Your man traded you," she said. "Now you belong to Sinopa." She pointed toward the tall woman, with the silver braids, the one who had walked away, without a word. "You work. You eat. You live. It is simple. I don't know how to." "Then you learn." Ayana turned to go. Stopped. "My name is Ayana. You ask me nothing. You do what you are told." Her gaze dropped once more to Celia's hands. "Maybe you survive." She left. Celia stood alone by the spring, holding a bundle of cloth, shaking so hard she could hear her own teeth. "Fine," she told herself. "Fine. You survived 6 years of a man who looked at you like a bad investment. You can survive this too." Except she was not sure that was true yet. Until it had to be true. Because there was not another option left standing anywhere she could see. The clothes fit poorly. Too loose here, too tight there. She washed in water, so cold it burned worse than the summer heat had, scrubbing at skin, that felt like it would never come fully clean again, not from dust, not from the memory of Garrett's ledger, not from the sound of 3 rifle shots cracking against canyon stone. When she was dressed, she stood there a long time. Not sure where to go. Not sure if going anywhere was even allowed. Sinopa. Standing behind her now, arms crossed, studying Celia the way a rancher studies a horse he has been handed against his better judgment. She took Celia's hand without asking. Turned it palm up. Looked at the blisters already rising, from a single day of rope, and rain and grief. Made a sound that might have been amusement. Might have been resignation. Might have been both at once. She pulled Celia toward a grinding stone set in the shade, corn piled beside it in a heap, that looked, to Celia's exhausted eyes, entirely impossible. The message needed no translation. Celia knelt. Picked up the mano. Tried to remember every half-glimpsed thing she had seen ranch hands' wives do, over the years, back when she had had a porch to watch, from and nothing better to do than watch. The corn scattered. Jumped. Refused every rhythm she tried to give it. 10 minutes in, she had barely dented the pile. Her palms were screaming. Sinopa returned. Looked at the pathetic evidence of Celia's effort. Said something in Apache, that was, unmistakably, not a compliment. Then she knelt. Took the mano. Demonstrated, sharp, efficient, economical movements, no wasted motion anywhere in her hands, and put the stone back in Celia's palms, and made her try again. Better. Still terrible. But better. The afternoon wore on like that. Grinding until her shoulders burned. Hauling water in clay jars heavier than they looked, spilling more than she carried, Sinopa's silence somehow louder than words would have been. Gathering mesquite beans into baskets. Attempting to clean a rabbit, and failing badly enough, that a passing child laughed out loud, before an older woman hushed him. By the time the sun touched the canyon walls, painting everything the color of a wound, Celia was shaking, with an exhaustion, that went past her body, and into something deeper. The camp gathered for the evening meal. Celia hung back at the edge of the firelight, not sure if she was welcome, not sure if welcome was even a category that applied to her anymore. Ayanna appeared. Thrust a wooden bowl into her hands without ceremony. Eat. Tomorrow you work again. The stew was thin. Some kind of meat, hominy, something bitter underneath, that she did not ask about. She ate standing, too tired to sit, gone in minutes. It was not enough. Nothing was going to be enough for a long while yet. Ayanna took the empty bowl. Pointed to a small wickiup at the camp's edge. You sleep there. Do not wander. Some here do not trust whites. Some might hurt you just to make a point. Comforting, Celia said, and something in her voice must have carried real humor despite everything, because Ayanna's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but its close relation. Welcome to your new life. That night, alone in a space barely large enough to lie down in, Celia finally let herself cry. Silent. Wrenching. Into a blanket that smelled of wood smoke, and someone else's life, because no one here needed to hear a white woman's grief, and she was not sure, yet whether they would even believe it was real. She thought of Garrett. Sitting down to dinner right now, with someone else entirely. Lila Prescott. A name from a ledger, a name he had said out loud like it cost him nothing. She thought of her old life. Soft. Pointless. 6 years of biscuits, and silence that she had once believed was the whole shape her existence was allowed to take. She thought of tomorrow. And the day after. And all the days stretching out ahead of her, into a future built entirely, from labor and language she did not speak, and a man named Hawk, whose face she kept returning to, without meaning to, the way your tongue returns to a sore tooth to check if it still hurts. And then, finally, mercifully, she slept. The second day started, before dawn, with someone kicking the frame of her wiki up hard enough to shudder the whole structure. Up. Ayana's voice, sharp as flint through the canvas. Everyone works. You too. Celia crawled out, into air cold enough to hurt her lungs. Stars still fading overhead. Fires already being coaxed back to life. Her hands had stiffened overnight, blisters cracked, weeping, useless, and when she tried to flex her fingers, pain shot clean up to her elbow. Sinopa handed her a clay pot. Water. Fill it. Do not spill. The spring was 100 yards off, down a narrow trail between rocks, that shifted underfoot in the half-dark. Celia stumbled through it. Filled the pot. Carried it back, with water sloshing, over the rim no matter how carefully she moved, until she staggered, into camp with the jar half empty, and her arms shaking. Sinopa looked at the pot. Looked at Celia's trembling hands. Said nothing. Pointed back at the spring. Again, Ayana translated, from somewhere behind her, sounding almost bored by the whole spectacle. I can barely. Then learn to carry it better. She went again. And again. By the fourth trip she had figured out how to brace the jar against her hip, how to move her whole body instead of just her aching arms, and the water came back mostly full. Sinopa grunted. It was, Celia was starting to learn, the closest thing to approval the old woman handed out. The days blurred after that. Not gently, never gently, but with a rhythm, that started to feel, against every expectation, almost bearable. Grinding corn, technique improving by degrees, so small she would have missed them, if her whole body had not been the one keeping score. Scraping hide stretched on frames, the smell of it turning her stomach, until she learned, almost without noticing, to breathe through her mouth instead. Gathering firewood, forearms crossed with scratches, that stopped mattering somewhere around the second week. No one spoke to her except to give orders. Which was, she found herself thinking one evening, almost restful. Because orders did not require her to explain herself. Did not require her to be pleasant, or grateful, or small in the particular way Garrett had always needed her to be small. Orders just required her hands. And her hands, it turned out, could keep going long, after the rest of her had stopped believing they could. 10 days in, Sinopa handed her a basket, and gestured toward the canyon mouth, saying something in rapid Apache, that Celia understood not one word of. Celia stared at her, helpless. Sinopa repeated herself. Slower. Louder. As though volume alone might bridge the gap between two languages, that shared no ground at all. It did not. Finally, with a sound of pure exasperation, Sinopa called out, and a boy appeared, from between the wiki-ups, small, quick-eyed, maybe 10 years old, all elbows and restless energy. They argued in Apache, the boy and Sinopa, until the old woman cut him off, with one sharp word, that seemed to end the discussion entirely. The boy's shoulders slumped. You come, he said to Celia. English, thick accented but clear. We find plants for eating. I don't know which plants. I show you. He was already walking. You follow. You learn. Is simple. Nothing about any of this was simple. But Celia picked up the basket, and followed, because that was, increasingly, the whole of her strategy for staying alive out here. Follow. Watch. Learn. Hope the learning came fast enough. What's your name? She asked, mostly to fill the silence. Tarak. He did not look back. Moved fast and sure, over ground that kept trying to slide out, from under her borrowed boots. I'm Celia. I know who you are. Flat. Matter of fact, the way children sometimes are about things adults have spent years learning to soften. The woman who was traded. Your man did not want you. The words landed harder than they should have, coming from someone so young. No, she said. He didn't. Then he is stupid. Turok stopped beside a cluster of low, silvery-leafed plants. This is good. Pick the leaves. Put in basket. She knelt beside him. The leaves were soft, fuzzy, smelled sharp and clean, when crushed between her fingers. What's it for? Tea. For when stomach hurts. He moved to another cluster, this one with small purple flowers. This one too. But only the flowers. The rest is poison. How do you know which parts? My grandmother taught me. He said it simply, the flat honesty children carry about death, before the world teaches them to dress it up in softer words. Before she died. She knew every plant in these canyons. Could heal almost anything. They worked in silence a while. Moving from plant to plant, Turok showing her, which to take, which to leave, how to harvest, without killing the root beneath. Why are you helping me? Celia finally asked. He shrugged, small shoulders rising and falling. Sinopa told me to. A beat. Also you are very bad at everything. Someone must help. Or you will die. Despite everything, despite the ache in her hands, and the ash still settled somewhere behind her ribs, Celia almost laughed. That's probably true. You are white. He said it without cruelty. Just observation, the way he might have noted the color of a stone. But you did not choose to come here. So maybe you are not, as bad as other whites. He paused, digging up a root, with quick, sure hands. Most whites, they take things. They break things. They kill and leave. I know some of that's true. Do you? His eyes came up, suddenly fierce in a way that did not match his 10 years. Do you know what they did to my grandmother? She went to the white town to trade. They pushed her off the sidewalk. She fell wrong. Died 3 days later. He went back to the digging, small hands angry in the dirt. So I do not like whites, he said. But Sinopa says you stay. So you stay. And if you stay, you must learn. Celia did not know what to say to that. The weight of it sat between them, heavier than the midday heat pressing down on both their shoulders. Weeks passed. Not gently. But they passed. Her hands toughened into something closer to leather. Her back stopped screaming, and settled into a permanent, low ache she had learned to live around. She could grind corn, without thinking about the motion at all now. Could haul water without stopping twice to rest. Could skin a rabbit in under 5 minutes, though she still hated it, and always would. She learned things beyond the work, too. That Sinopa's daughter had died in childbirth 2 winters back, and the old woman had never quite been the same since. That Ayana's scowl hid a fierce, unspoken protectiveness toward the camp's younger children. That Ashkiai had lost count of the white men he had killed defending this ground, and that everyone spoke of it, with a quiet pride, that did not feel like bloodlust, so much as grief, that had run out of other places to go. The language came slowly. Words for fire, water, food. Commands repeated so often they had worn grooves into her memory: come, go, stop, hurry. She could not hold a conversation yet. But she could understand, when she was being told to move out of the way, or that she had done something wrong, which was, she admitted to herself, with grim humor, still fairly often. He started appearing at odd moments. Not intrusive. Just there. Adjusting the way she held a water jar. Showing her the right angle to hold a knife, so it would not slip mid-skin. Teaching her the hand signals the hunters used: quiet, danger, come here, stay, with the patient economy of a man, who did not waste words, when a gesture would do. Hawk. He never explained why he was helping. Never made conversation beyond whatever the moment required. And Celia, grateful and a little bewildered by the attention, did not push for more than he offered. The evening it truly started, the evening she would come to think of, later, as the real beginning, though she could not have said why at the time. She was hauling water at dusk, and nearly walked straight into him on the trail, from the spring. He was simply standing there. Still. Waiting, though she had not known he was waiting for her specifically, until it was already too late to pretend otherwise. She startled. Water sloshed over the rim of the jar. "Sorry," she said automatically. "I didn't see you." He did not answer right away. Just reached out, and took the jar from her hands, before she could protest. "You're carrying it wrong," he said. His English was plain, unaccented, the way it had been, that first morning in the canyon. "Too much weight on one side. That's why your back hurts." "How do you know my back hurts?" "Everyone's back hurts, the first month." He shifted the jar. Set it against her hip at a new angle. Center the weight. Use your legs. Not your arms. He handed it back. The difference was immediate. Still heavy. But balanced now, in a way, that made the whole walk back suddenly, almost shockingly, manageable. "Better," he said. Not a question. "Yes. Thank you." He nodded once. Turned to go. That was it. Their first real conversation since the canyon. Maybe 15 words total, spread across 2 minutes, and yet something in Celia's chest had shifted in a way she did not examine too closely, that night, or for several nights after. He started appearing more often after that. Never announced. Never explained. Just there, at the edges of her days, correcting a grip here, offering a better angle there, teaching her without ever once making her feel small for needing to be taught, which, she was beginning to understand, was its own kind of rare. Because Garrett had never once corrected her, without cruelty folded somewhere inside the lesson. Every mistake she had made in 6 years of marriage had come, with a cost attached, some small withdrawal, from an account of worth she was always running short on. Hawk did not do that. He simply showed her the better way, and moved on, as though her learning it, or not learning it cost him nothing either way, and somehow that made her want to learn it faster than fear ever had. By her 6th week in camp, she could almost call herself useful. By her 8th, Sinopa had stopped watching her, with quite so much open suspicion. By her 10th, Ayanna had actually smiled at her. Twice. It was on an ordinary afternoon, grinding corn, always grinding corn, the rhythm of it worn, so deep into her hands now, that her mind was free to wander, while her body worked, that she heard the traders arrive. 3 men on horseback, pack mules trailing behind, voices carrying a mix of Spanish and Apache she could not fully follow. Ayanna went to meet them at the camp's edge, negotiations conducted low and quiet while the rest of the camp pretended not to listen, and listened anyway. Celia kept grinding. Kept her eyes down. Told herself whatever news the traders carried had nothing to do with her. She was wrong. Ayanna appeared beside her a few minutes later, and something in her face, some new, careful gentleness that Celia had never once seen on her before, made the stone slip in Celia's hands, before the girl had said a single word. "The traders bring news, from the White Town," Ayanna said. "What news?" "Your husband." Celia's whole body went still. "What about him?" "He has married again." The stone stopped moving entirely. "When?" 2 weeks ago. Ayanna's careful gentleness faltered, just slightly, at whatever she saw crossing Celia's face. "A young woman. The traders say she is already carrying his child." The words hit like ice water down the back of her spine. "That's not possible," Celia heard herself say, though of course it was entirely possible, was in fact exactly the kind of arithmetic Garrett had always been good at, moving quickly, moving efficiently, never once wasting time on grief, when there was a replacement already waiting in the wings. "The whole town talks of it," Ayanna said. "Hale's new wife. His son coming. His son. Not even born yet, and already claimed. Already counted as the thing Celia had failed, 6 years running, to provide. Her name," Celia said. Her voice had gone strange, and distant in her own ears. "Do you know her name?" Ayanna's brow furrowed, trying to recall. "Prescott. Lila Prescott. Her father, he owns land papers in the White Town. Prescott. The name from the ledger. Transfer pending, CH status." She had read those words, with her own thumb bleeding across the page, weeks ago now, a lifetime ago, and she had told herself she would ask Garrett what they meant. She never had the chance. And now the pieces were arranging themselves in her mind, with a horrible, mechanical clarity. The Prescott land office. The dowry acreage. A marriage arranged, with a speed, that had nothing to do, with love and everything to do with paperwork. He had not just replaced her. He had been building toward this, before Renner ever delivered his verdict. Before the canyon. Before the 3 rifle shots, that had ended one version of her life, and begun another. "This bothers you," Ayanna said. Not unkindly. Just observing, the way Tarak observed things, plain and unadorned. "No," Celia said. The lie was obvious even to her own ears. "Yes," she admitted. I don't know why. I knew he'd remarry. He told me himself, before he left me in that canyon. I just didn't think." She stopped. Started again. "I didn't think it would happen this fast. Or that it would feel like this." The rage arrived without warning. Filled her chest, her throat, the base of her skull, all at once, hot and total, and nothing like the clean grief she might have expected. Something uglier. Something that tasted like bile, and felt, absurdly, like broken glass working its way up, through her ribs. She stood so fast the grinding stone tipped, corn scattering across the dirt. "I need to walk," she said, and did not wait for permission. She made it to the edge of camp, before her legs gave out on her. Pressed her back to the canyon wall. Hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood, from her own palms, and she barely felt it, because the pain in her chest was, so much louder than anything her hands could manage. Lila Prescott. 20 years old, probably. Soft. Willing. Already pregnant, already carrying the exact thing Celia's broken body had never once been able to give. "Because he threw me away like something already spoiled, and inside 2 months he's building the life he always wanted, with someone new. Someone better. Someone whose body hadn't failed the one job he'd ever asked of it." She did not hear Hawk approach. Just became aware, gradually, of him standing a few feet off, not looking at her directly, giving her the room to fall apart, without an audience. "I'm fine," she said. Through her teeth. "No," he said. "You're not." The plain honesty of it cracked something open in her chest, that she had not meant to let anyone see. She laughed. Sharp. Bitter. Nothing like a real laugh at all. "No. I'm not." He was quiet a moment. Then. "The man who traded you. He's married again. Apparently. And this hurts you. Shouldn't it?" She turned to look at him fully, this quiet man, who rationed his words like they cost him something to spend. "He threw me away like garbage. And 2 months later he's building his whole life, with someone else. Someone better." "Not better," Hawk said. "Younger." He picked up a stone from the dirt. Turned it over once in his hand. "My mother was traded, too," he said. To a white family. When she was 12. For 3 horses and some ammunition. He threw the stone, watched it arc off, into the shadow of the canyon. She spent 4 years, as a servant, before she escaped. The man who bought her, he probably forgot her name inside a month. Went on with his life like she'd never existed at all. He looked at her then. Dark eyes steady in a way that made her want to look away, and made it impossible to. Does that make what happened to her less real? Celia did not answer. Could not. You're angry, Hawk said. Good. Be angry. Anger is better than grief. Anger keeps you moving. A beat. But don't let it make you stupid. Don't let it eat you hollow, until there's nothing left standing. What else is there? Survival, he said. Strength. Becoming something he never believed you could be. He gestured back toward camp, the fires, the wickiups, the ordinary evening business of people who had survived worse than she had, and kept living anyway. You were soft when you came here. Useless. You're not anymore. I'm still useless. You carry water without stopping. You work all day without complaining. You're learning our language faster than most whites ever bother to try. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but close enough to feel like one. That is not useless. That is adaptation. That is strength. He turned to go. Wait, she said, before she had decided to say anything at all. He stopped. She did not have the words, yet for what she wanted to say. Did not fully understand it herself. So she said the only true thing she had. Thank you. For not telling me it doesn't matter. Everyone else would have told me it doesn't matter. Something in his face shifted. Softened, just at the edges, in a way she was starting to recognize, as the closest thing he offered to tenderness. It matters, he said. That doesn't mean it gets to own you. He walked away then, disappearing into the maze of rock and firelight, and Celia stood alone at the edge of camp a long while, the rage still burning in her chest, but banked now. Controlled. Something she could carry instead of something carrying her. It was 3 nights later that he said it. They were sitting at the edge of the firelight, not quite together, not quite apart, the careful distance 2 people keep when neither is certain what the other one wants yet. Celia had been quiet a long while, turning a strip of sinew over and over in her hands, without really working it. You are thinking about him again, Hawk said. Not a question. I'm thinking about a lot of things. About the son he will have. She looked up, startled that he had guessed it so exactly. You wear it on your face, he said. Not unkindly. Like a brand. I can't help it, she admitted. 6 years, he told me it was the only thing that mattered. The only thing I was for. Her voice cracked, just slightly, on the last word. And in 2 months some other woman gives him what I couldn't, and suddenly none of it, none of me, mattered at all. Hawk was quiet a long moment. Long enough that she thought he might not answer at all. Then he said it. Low. Plain. No performance in it, the way nothing he had ever said to her carried performance. I never wanted sons to carry my name forward, he said. I only ever wanted someone who would stay. The words landed somewhere deep in her chest, somewhere Garrett's cruelty had hollowed out years ago, and left empty. She did not answer right away. Could not. Because 6 years of being told her worth began, and ended with her ability to produce an heir had built a wall inside her, that did not come down, from one sentence, however true it felt. But something in the wall cracked. Just slightly. Just enough to let a little light through. Why are you telling me that? She finally managed. He did not look at her. Kept his eyes on the fire, the way a man does, when he has said more than he meant to, and needs somewhere else to put his gaze. Because you needed to hear it, he said. And because it's true. He stood then. Left her sitting there, with the sinew forgotten in her lap, and something new, and unfamiliar unfolding slowly, carefully, in the space, where the old wound had been. The war party came home wrong 5 weeks later. Celia heard it, before she understood it, a change in the camp's rhythm, voices rising where they should have stayed low, the particular tension, that had nothing to do with the ordinary business of survival. She found Ayanna at the edge of the gathering crowd, face drawn tight. What's happened? A hunting party. Ayanna's voice was flat in the way voices go flat, when they are holding something back by force. White soldiers attacked. Killed 3. Wounded 2. Celia's stomach dropped. Which soldiers? From where? The fort near your husband's land. The words landed like a stone dropped in still water, ripples spreading out in directions Celia did not yet have the shape of. Ashki called the camp together within the hour. The gathering felt different from anything Celia had witnessed here before, not the ordinary rhythm of daily labor, but something coiled, something with teeth in it. He spoke in Apache, voice carrying without needing to rise. Celia caught maybe 1 word in 5, but the crowd's reaction told her everything the language could not. Anger. Grief. A restless, dangerous energy building like heat, before a storm breaks. Hawk found her at the edge of it, his face graver than she had seen it, since the canyon. They are planning to retaliate, he said, low enough that only she could hear. Ashki wants to hit your husband's ranch. Celia's blood went cold. Why his? There must be other ranches closer to the fort. Because his ranch borders the boundary agreed to in the peace. Hawk's jaw tightened. If soldiers came from near his land, it means he broke the agreement. Or allowed it to be broken. You don't sound certain. I'm not. He glanced toward the canyon's rim, toward the direction of the fort, something calculating moving behind his eyes. I want to scout the boundary, before anyone rides anywhere. Something about the timing bothers me. What do you mean? I mean soldiers do not usually move, that fast, that far from the fort, without someone telling them exactly where and when to find an easy target. His eyes found hers. Steady. Serious. Someone who knew our hunting party's route better than any soldier should have. The implication sat between them, ugly and unspoken. You think Garrett told them, Celia said. I think, Hawk said carefully, that your husband has never once done anything that did not serve him first. 2 days later, Hawk returned from scouting the boundary, with his jaw set, and his eyes hard. He found Celia at the grinding stone, and crouched beside her, voice pitched low enough, that no one else would catch it. There were tracks, he said. Soldiers, moving in position, before the hunting party ever crossed the line. Waiting. Not responding to an attack. Expecting one. Celia's hands went still over the corn. That means someone told them where to be. It means someone wanted a reason for what happens next. His eyes were dark, unreadable in a way she was learning meant he was working through something he did not yet want to say out loud. A war paid for by both sides losing something. Your husband's ranch sits on the boundary line. If soldiers strike here again, and we strike back, then it looks like the peace failed on its own, Celia finished. Not because anyone broke it deliberately. Just because that's what happens out here. Her stomach turned over slow and sick. And whoever profits from the ranch surviving intact, whoever profits from land changing hands quietly in the chaos. She stopped. The ledger rose up in her memory again, unbidden. Transfer pending, CH status. He's not just protecting his ranch, she said slowly. He's protecting a transaction. Something already in motion, before any of this happened. Hawk studied her. You know something. I know a page in a ledger I wasn't supposed to see. Her jaw tightened. I don't know enough yet. Not enough to prove it. Not enough to stop it. Then we go anyway, Hawk said. Because whether or not we understand the whole of it, Ashki will not wait for proof. 3 men are dead. That is enough reason for him. And if I asked you to wait? I would tell you, Hawk said, that waiting has already cost people their lives. And that the raid is coming, with or without your permission. His voice gentled, just slightly. But you could shape what happens inside it. If you're willing. Celia sat with that a long moment. The rage that had lived in her chest, since the news of Lila Prescott, the grief that had lived there, since the canyon, the cold new suspicion about the ledger, all of it braided together now, into something that felt less like fury, and more like resolve. I'll help, she said. On conditions. She found Ashki the next morning, sharpening a blade outside his wickiup, and made herself stand tall in front of him despite every year of training, that told her women did not walk up to powerful men, and make demands. I'll tell you everything about the ranch, she said. The layout. The routines. Where the men sleep. Where the guns are kept. She took a breath. But no one dies, who doesn't raise a weapon first. And no one touches the house. Ashki's eyebrows rose, faint and deliberate. Conditions. The house is where Garrett sleeps, Celia said. It's also where his wife sleeps. She's pregnant. She's not part of any of this. Something hardened in Ashki's scarred face. White women were not part of it, when soldiers burned our winter camp. When children ran, from the flames, and did not make it out. I know, Celia said, and meant it, the grief in her voice honest enough, that Ashki's eyes flickered, with something almost like respect. And I'm sorry for, that in a way I don't think I can make you believe yet. But if you want my help, those are my terms. Ashki studied her a long moment. The kind of look, that weighs a person all the way down to the bone. Then he called out, and Hawk appeared, as he always seemed to, like he had been standing just out of sight the whole time. Tell her the plan, Ashki said. Over the following days, Celia drew the ranch out in the dirt, with a stick, over and over, until Hawk and the others could have walked it blind. She described Manuel's routines, the hands who drank too much to wake fast, the ones who slept light, and would fight hard. She told them about the ammunition stored in the barn loft. The safe in Garrett's study, sitting not far from the ledger, that had started all of this. She told them everything except the one thing she still did not fully understand, what, exactly, that ledger meant, and how far Garrett's plans might already have gone. At night, alone, she wondered what she was becoming. A traitor, one voice in her whispered. You're handing over the home you lived in for 6 years, however loveless it was. No, another voice answered, steadier, newer, sounding almost like Hawk. You're the only one, who can make sure this doesn't turn into a slaughter. That's not betrayal. That's the only mercy left available to you. She did not know which voice to trust. She only knew that the raid was coming regardless of what she believed, and that her choice was never between violence and peace. It was only ever between a violence she could shape, and one she could not. They rode out at midday, moving fast through the canyons, Celia behind Hawk, with her arms around his waist, and every muscle in his back drawn tight with focus. They had argued about bringing her. Too dangerous, Ashki had said. But she had insisted, if her information proved wrong anywhere, she needed to be there to fix it. The truth she did not say aloud was simpler. She needed to see it. Needed to watch, with her own eyes, the ending of the life that had tried to end her. They reached the boundary of Hale land, as the sun began its slow copper descent. The party split, half circling east, half west, and Celia stayed, with Hawk and Ashki on a ridge overlooking the ranch below. It looked the same. Painfully, impossibly the same. Whitewashed house. Sprawling barns. corrals full of cattle and horses. Smoke curling up from the kitchen chimney, meaning someone, Lila, maybe, was cooking dinner the way Celia once had, in a kitchen that no longer belonged to her in any sense at all. Even from this distance, Celia could just make out a slight new roundness to the figure moving past the window. Lila's condition was beginning to show. 4 months along, perhaps 5. There. Celia pointed, voice steady despite everything roiling underneath it. Main barn. Ammunition's in the loft, west corner. Bunkhouse sits just behind it. Fire the barn first. It'll draw everyone toward the flames, and away from their guns. Ashki passed the information along in quick Apache. Nodded once. They waited as the sun touched the horizon. Waited as ranch hands finished their evening chores, and drifted toward the bunkhouse. Waited as lamplight came up warm and domestic in the windows. Then Ashki gave the signal. The first torch caught the barn roof, and for one held breath, nothing happened. Then the flames took. Fast. Hungry. Climbing the dry wood like something alive and starving. Someone shouted below. Then someone else. The bunkhouse door flew open, men spilling out half-dressed, scrambling toward a fire that was already beyond any bucket line's power to stop. Cattle bellowed, panicked, as fences came down. Horses screamed in the corrals. A gunshot cracked. Then another. No, Celia thought, cold flooding her chest. They weren't supposed to. Someone got brave, Hawk said beside her, rifle already tracking movement below. The main barn collapsed, with a roar that shook the ground under their boots. Sparks fountained skyward, and the wind that had been steady all day, chose that exact moment to shift. Toward the house. They need to get her out of there, Celia said, already moving. If those sparks reached the roof. She did not finish the thought. Did not need to. The yard was chaos. Heat and smoke, and screaming animals, and men fighting fire, and each other in a tangle Celia could not fully make sense of, as she ran through it. She lost track of Hawk in the confusion. Lost track of everything except the need to reach that house before the wind finished what the fire had started. The door stood open. She could hear crying inside, a young woman's voice, high and frightened, calling for Garrett. Celia ran up the porch steps she had swept 1,000 times in another life. Into an entry hall thick, with smoke seeping through the walls. Lila was in the parlor. Frozen. Hands pressed to her mouth, the small round curve of her belly just visible beneath a pale dress, that would be ash, within the hour, if no one moved fast. You have to leave, Celia said. Now. The winds turned. Lila's eyes went enormous. Who are you? That doesn't matter. You need to get out before. The window exploded inward. Not fire. A warrior climbing through, face painted for war, knife already in hand, barely older than a boy, and Celia understood, in the half-second, before it happened, that this was the exact horror she had tried to bargain against, and had not quite managed to prevent. He saw Lila. Saw her belly. Started forward. No. Celia threw herself between them. Stop. He shoved her aside hard enough to send her stumbling, into the hearth. She grabbed the fire poker, swung it wide, he ducked, came at her instead, knife flashing, and she felt it catch her shoulder, a bright line of heat, blood already soaking warm, through her sleeve. Then Hawk was there. He moved faster than she had ever seen a man move. Caught the boy's wrist, twisted, sent the knife clattering across the floor, slammed him hard against the wall, and spoke in furious, low Apache that needed no translation at all. The boy argued back. Hawk hit him, not hard, but enough, and said something quieter, that landed harder than the blow had. The young warrior's shoulders slumped. He scrambled back out, through the broken window, shame written plain across his face even in the smoke-dim light. Hawk turned to her. "You're bleeding." "I'm fine." She was not. Her shoulder was on fire, her vision swimming at the edges. "Lila." She turned, forcing her voice steady. "We need to move. Now." Lila had gone chalk white against the wall, hands cradling her belly. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't hurt my baby." "No one's going to hurt you," Celia said, and meant it entirely, and understood, even through the pain, and the smoke, that she meant it more than she had meant almost anything in 6 long years. "But you need to walk. Can you walk?" Lila nodded, mute with terror. Celia helped her up, guided her toward the door. Outside, the yard was already beginning to empty of chaos, fires burning themselves out, warriors melting back, into the dark, as fast as they had come, everything already spent, that could be spent. Garrett was suddenly there. Rifle raised, face twisted with something past rage. "Get away from her." "She's fine," Celia said. "I'm making sure she stays that way." He saw her face clearly then, fully, for the first time. Froze. "Celia?" She almost laughed. "Almost." "Surprised?" "You're with them." Understanding dawned across his features like something physically painful. "You did this." "I learned from the best," she said. His rifle swung toward her, and for one long, terrible second she thought he might actually pull the trigger. Then Lila grabbed his arm. "No," she said, voice shaking but clear. "She saved me. There was a man, he was going to, she saved me." Garrett's rifle lowered, slowly, his pale eyes never once leaving Celia's face. "What have you become?" "Something that doesn't need you to give it value," Celia said. Her shoulder was bleeding badly now, the world starting to gray at the edges. She turned, walked away into the smoke, and did not look back. Hawk caught up, with her at the edge of the yard. "Can you ride?" "Have to." He lifted her onto his horse. Mounted behind her, one arm coming around her waist to hold her steady, as the world tipped and swam. They rode into the night, leaving behind the smoldering ranch, Garrett's shattered evening, and the whole long, silent shape of the life Celia had once believed was the only one available to her. The soldiers came on the 4th day. Not a scout. Not a rumor carried in on a trader's tongue. Real riders, thundering down through the canyon mouth at dawn, dust rising behind them like a storm, that had learned to walk on legs. Celia heard the horses, before she understood what they meant. Because sleep does that to a person. It softens the edges of danger just long enough to get you killed. Until Ayana's voice cut, through the wiki-up wall like a blade. "Up. Now. They're here." Celia's shoulder screamed when she moved. The wound from the ranch had not fully closed. Sinopa's poultice had done what it could, but 3 days of hard riding, since the raid had reopened it twice, and now it throbbed, with every heartbeat, a second pulse living just beneath the first. She crawled out into gray light. And stopped. Because the camp was already dissolving around her. Wiki-ups collapsing. Fires being kicked to embers and scattered. Children being swept up, onto the fastest horses, silent, trained for exactly this the way city children were trained for church. Not panic. Celia understood that now, watching it. This was not panic. This was practiced. Generations of practiced. Sinopa thrust a leather pack into her hands. "Only what you can carry." "How many soldiers?" "Too many." The old woman's face had gone to stone. "Your husband brought an army." The words landed like a fist to the sternum. They moved out, before the sun cleared the canyon rim. A long, strung-out line, the old and the very young mounted, everyone else on foot, carrying what could be carried, and abandoning the rest to whatever came after. Celia walked beside Sinopa, matching the old woman's brisk, unhurried pace, and found herself grateful for it. Because grief needed a rhythm to hide inside. And walking, at least, gave her one. Turok fell in step beside her. Small face set hard. "You should be, with the other children," she said. "I am almost a man." His jaw was stubborn in the exact way 10-year-old jaws get stubborn. "I stay. I watch you. You are still very bad at watching where you step." She almost laughed. Almost. It came out instead, as something closer to a sob, that she swallowed, before it could finish forming. They pushed north, through country that grew crueler with every mile. Narrow defile. Loose scree that shifted and betrayed the footing. Dry washes that would turn to drowning rivers, if the sky ever opened, and the sky, gray and swollen all morning, looked like it might. By nightfall they had covered 8 miles. Not enough. Nowhere near enough. Ashki called a halt in a box canyon, walls on 3 sides, 1 narrow entrance. Defensible. Except defensible also meant trapped, and everyone standing in, that firelight knew, which word mattered more, if the soldiers found them first. No fires were lit. People ate what they could eat cold, spoke in whispers, and listened to the dark. Hawk found Celia against the canyon wall, her shoulder wrapped fresh, blood already seeping faint, through the new bandage. "Let me see it," he said. "It's fine. It's bleeding through your shirt. Let me see it." She let him. His fingers were careful, probing the edges, with a gentleness that did not match the grim line of his mouth. "Infected," he said quietly. "You need Sinopa. Properly. Not a field wrap. She's busy. Now." He was already moving, before she could argue, and Sinopa arrived minutes later, with her medicine bag, and an expression that promised pain, before she had even opened it. She cleaned the wound, with something that burned worse than the original cut. Celia bit down on a leather strap, and did not scream, though it cost her. "Stupid girl," Sinopa muttered, working fast, efficient hands. Running into fire. Getting stabbed. "I saved her," Celia managed. "The pregnant one. I saved her." "Yes. Very noble." A pause. "Also very stupid." But her hands were gentle, as she bound the wound tight, and something in that contradiction, the scolding and the tenderness arriving in the same breath, undid something in Celia's chest, that she did not have words for yet. Hawk stayed close, through the night, sitting near enough, that she could hear him breathing, not close enough to call it anything but watchfulness. "This is bad," he said finally. "You know that." "I know. 40 soldiers. Maybe more by now. Your husband likely called in reinforcements, from the fort." He stared out, into the dark canyon beyond the fire glow. "We have children. Elders. Limited ammunition. The numbers are not good. Best case? We stay ahead of them long enough to lose them in country they won't follow. A beat. Worst case, a great many people die tomorrow, who did nothing to deserve it." Celia sat with that. Let it settle, into her chest alongside everything else already living there. "You could leave," Hawk said suddenly. "Head east. You're white. The soldiers won't hurt you." She almost laughed at that too. "You think Garrett would let me walk away, after what happened at his ranch? He'd shoot me himself, before he let me reach the road." "Maybe. And what about everyone else? Turok. Ayana. Sinopa. The people who took me in, when I had nothing." She shook her head, hard. "I helped start this. I don't get to run, when it gets difficult." "Noble sentiment," Hawk said. "Won't stop a bullet. Neither will hiding." He was quiet a long moment. Then, low. "You've changed. Is that good or bad?" "Good," he said. "The woman your husband traded away wouldn't have said any of that." They moved again before dawn. Gunfire found them by mid-morning. Distant at first. Then not. Scouts had made contact, or been found, the distinction did not matter once the shooting started. The whole line surged forward, exhaustion forgotten, children hoisted onto shoulders, supplies abandoned wholesale in the desperate scramble for anywhere that offered a chance. They rounded a bend, and Hawk saw it, before anyone else did, a narrow split in the rock, barely wide enough for a body to squeeze through. "Through here," he called. Quickly. The gap opened into a hidden valley. Small. Protected. Water trickling from stone, enough space for everyone to fit, if they packed in tight. "How did you know about this?" Ashki demanded. "I scout," Hawk said. "It is what I do." He studied the entrance a moment longer, calculating. "They'll find it eventually. But only a few men can come through at once. We can hold it." "For how long?" "Long enough to rest. Long enough for some to slip farther north." He looked at Ashki, and something passed between the two men that needed no translation. "Or long enough to make them regret coming after us at all." Ashki understood immediately. This was not a hiding place. It was a place to make a stand. Positions went up fast. The best shots took cover where they could sweep the narrow entrance. What little ammunition remained was distributed, with grim care. Women and children moved to the back of the valley, as far from the gap as the rock would allow. Celia found herself crouched behind a boulder, a rifle in her hands, that she barely knew how to hold, Ayana on one side, and a grim-faced warrior named Wapi on the other. "You know how to shoot?" Wapi asked. Broken English, clipped. "Point. Pull the trigger. Close enough." He showed her how to brace it against her shoulder, how to sight along the barrel. "Aim center. Do not try for the head. Hit them anywhere and they go down." Her hands were shaking. "I've never shot anyone. First time for everything." His smile held no humor at all. "They come through that gap, they are trying to kill your friends. Kill them first." The waiting was worse than the running had been. Until the first soldier appeared in the gap. He came through cautious, rifle raised, clearly braced for an ambush. Made it 3 steps, before Ashki's shot took him, through the chest. He went down. His rifle clattered against stone. For one held breath, nothing. Then everything. More soldiers tried to force through, but the gap held them the way Hawk had promised, 1 or 2 at a time, silhouetted against the bright canyon behind them, easy targets for defenders dug in and waiting. The first wave fell. Then the second. The soldiers pulled back to regroup. "They'll try to flank," Hawk said, moving low between positions. "Watch the walls. Someone will try to climb." He was right. 20 minutes later movement flickered on the left wall, a soldier working his way down from above. Wapi shifted, fired once, and the man fell. But more kept coming. The gunfire settled into something constant now. The crack of rifles. The whine of ricochet off stone. Shouting, on both sides, men fighting and dying in a fight neither of them had started, but both of them would carry the weight of forever. Celia fired when targets appeared. Reloaded with shaking hands. One made it through during a lull. Young. Maybe 20. Dirt and fear streaked across his face. He saw her, raised his rifle. She fired first. The recoil slammed into her wounded shoulder, hard enough to white out her vision for a half-second. The soldier stumbled. Looked down at the blood spreading dark across his chest. Looked back up at her, confused, almost, before he fell. Her stomach heaved. She turned away, and was sick behind the boulder, her whole body shaking in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. First kill is always hard, Whoppy said, not unkindly. Gets easier. She did not want it to get easier. But she picked the rifle back up anyway. Reloaded. Held her position. The fighting stretched what felt like hours, and was probably less than one. Then, abruptly, it stopped. A voice called out from beyond the gap. English. Authority worn into every syllable. You in there. This is Captain Reyes, United States Army. Lay down your weapons and surrender. You will be treated fairly. Ashki laughed. Harsh. Bitter. Fairly. The way soldiers treat us fairly. We have you surrounded, Reyes continued. There is no escape. Surrender now, and no more blood needs to be shed. Hawk's eyes were already moving. Scanning the walls, the gap, every possible line of approach. He's lying about being surrounded. But he's not wrong that we're trapped. Ashki rose enough to be seen. Called back in accented, clear English. You want surrender. Send Hale. Let him stand here, and tell us why he breaks agreements. Why he lets soldiers murder men, who came in peace. Silence. Then, Reyes again. Mr. Hale is not present. This is a military operation. Surrender or face the consequences. He isn't here. Celia's heart kicked hard. Where is he? Safe at his ranch, most likely, Ayanna said, disgust plain in her voice. While others do his killing. That felt wrong to Celia. Wrong in a way she could not immediately name. They're going to try something, Hawk said, low, already moving. This is too easy. He calls for surrender. We relax. And the explosion came from the back of the valley. Not where soldiers should have been standing. Where the women and children sheltered. Rock and dust fountained skyward. They had blown a hole in the far wall, and through the smoking gap, more soldiers were already pouring in. It became close quarters chaos in seconds. No cover. Nowhere to run. Celia saw Whoppy go down, throat opened. Saw Ashki turn to meet the new threat head-on, roaring something in Apache, that gathered the last of his fighters around him like a wall, buying seconds, buying feet of ground, until a rifle butt, and then a bayonet ended what 40 years of survival had built. He fell defending the gap he had chosen not to abandon, and there was no time, no room, no breath left in that valley to mourn him properly. Only to remember, later, that he had not run. She ran toward the sound of Tarak's voice, firing as she went. Dropped one soldier. Missed another. Felt a bullet crack past her ear close enough to feel its heat. Reached the boy just as a soldier raised his rifle over him. She swung her own like a club. Connected with bone. The soldier dropped and did not move again. We have to run, Tarak was screaming. We have to. Hawk appeared out of the smoke like something conjured. Face streaked with blood, that was not entirely his own. This way. Through the rocks. Now. He pulled them both toward a crack in the valley wall Celia had not noticed before, narrow, almost invisible, barely wide enough for a body to squeeze through. Others were running too, the retreat dissolving into pure animal survival. They squeezed through, Hawk first, pulling Tarak, Celia bringing up the rear, blood roaring in her ears loud enough to drown out even the gunfire. They ran until Celia's lungs burned raw. Until her legs shook, so badly she thought they might simply stop obeying her. Finally Hawk stopped in a narrow defile, chest heaving. Wait. Listen. They froze. Nothing close. Nothing immediate. Did we lose them? She whispered. For now. Hawk's face had gone grim in a way she had never seen on him. But we lost a great deal more than that. The reality of it hit like a physical blow. Ashki. Sinopa. Ayana. All the people, who had taken her in, taught her, tolerated her presence long enough to eventually trust it. Were they dead? Captured? Scattered into the rocks, with no way back to each other? I did this, she said. This is my doing. Hawk gripped her shoulders. Made her look at him directly. No. This began long before you arrived. You did not start this war. You were only ever another casualty of it. They moved through the night. At some point others joined them out of the dark, a young mother clutching an infant, 2 more warriors, an old man, who somehow kept pace despite his years. Not many. Fewer than 10, out of a camp that had once numbered 30. Dawn found them on a high ridge, looking back the way they had come. Smoke rose in thin columns, from multiple points across the canyon system. Is anyone? She could not finish the question. I don't know, Hawk said. Some may have scattered into the rocks and survived. Many did not. They turned their backs on the smoke. Kept walking north. 3 days later, deep enough into the wild country, that Hawk finally judged it safe to stop for more than a few hours, they found a cave, with a spring nearby. The group collapsed inside it, too exhausted even to speak. Celia's shoulder had gone, from angry to something worse. Fever built behind her eyes, blurring the edges of everything. The young mother, her name was Ayasha, examined the wound, and shook her head slowly. This is very bad, she said. Without Sinopa's medicine. She did not finish the sentence. I'll be fine, Celia said. It was a lie, and everyone in that cave knew it. That night the fever peaked. At some point Hawk's face swam into focus above her, a cool cloth against her forehead. Still here? His voice was soft in a way she had rarely heard from him. Trying to be good. Keep trying. He wrung out the cloth. I need to tell you something. Telling a possibly dying woman's secret seems unwise. You're not dying. Too stubborn for that. But his expression stayed serious. When I told you to bank your anger, and move forward, after the ranch, I was talking to myself, as much as to you. She fought through the fever haze to focus on his face. I spent 10 years angry, he said. At the school, that tried to erase who I was. At the people in my own camp, who never fully trusted a man who'd come back from that world. The anger made me a good scout. It did not make me a happy man. What changed? You. He said it simply, the way he said most true things, without decoration, without asking for anything in return. Watching you choose to become something new, instead of letting bitterness decide it for you. It reminded me I could make a different choice too. Her hand found his in the dark, weak but certain. What choice is that? To stop running, he said. To stop being alone. To try building something, instead of only surviving it. The fever pulled her under, before she could answer. But she held the words, with her all the way down, into the dark, and carried them back up again 3 days later, when the fever finally broke. She woke weak, as a newborn colt, soaked through with sweat, but alive. Tarak was there, when her eyes opened, his young face lighting instantly. You live. Apparently. Her voice came out cracked. Where's Hawk? Scouting. Always scouting. The boy handed her water. He did not leave your side except to hunt. He was very worried. Where are we? Far from everything. Tarak's face turned serious, older than his years by several lifetimes now. But we cannot stay here forever. Winter is coming. We need more people. More supplies. We are too few. Hawk returned that evening, with a deer across his shoulders. Afterward, he pulled Celia aside to the edge of the cave's overhang. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what comes next. And? We can't go back. The canyons will be crawling, with soldiers for months." He stopped himself. "Started again. We need a new plan." "What kind?" "West. There are settlements in the territory beyond, mixed communities. Apache, Mexican, some whites who don't ask too many questions." His eyes found hers, steady. "We could disappear there. Start over. What about the others? Some will come. Some won't." A pause, careful. "But I think you, and I should go regardless. Together." Her heart gave one hard, uneven beat. "Together. If you want that." He was looking at her directly now, no hedging left in it. "I know you didn't choose any of this. And maybe you don't choose me either. But I'm offering anyway. What would we do there?" "Whatever we want." A faint smile. "What do you want to do?" She realized, with something close to shock, that she did not fully know. She had never once asked herself what she actually wanted. "I want to stop running," she said slowly. "I want to build something that's mine." A pause. "Ours. Maybe." Hawk's smile was small. But it was real. "Then we will," he said. They reached the settlement 11 days later. A cluster of adobe buildings at the edge of the territory, smoke rising from cook fires, dogs barking at their strange, ragged approach. Celia collapsed before she reached the first building, her body finally surrendering everything it had been holding together, through sheer will. The last thing she remembered was a woman's face above her, kind eyes, capable hands, saying something in Spanish she could not quite catch, before the dark took her. She woke in an actual bed. Sheets. A pillow. Sunlight through a real window. A woman appeared in the doorway carrying a tray. Older. Warm-eyed. "Ah. You wake." A soft smile. "I am Rosa. This is my home. You slept 2 days. Your body needed it." "The boy," Celia managed. "Tarak. Is he?" "He lives. Fever broke yesterday. Strong boy." Rosa set the tray down. "The man who came, with you, the one with the wounded arm. He asks about you every hour." Relief hit so hard Celia started crying, right there in a stranger's bed, and Rosa simply sat, and patted her hand, until it passed. It took Celia 3 more days to find her feet properly, and when she did, she found Hawk at the small cantina, arm in a sling, a fresh scar tracing his jaw. She crossed to him, without thinking, and wrapped her arms around him, careless of the pain still living in her shoulder. "You're up," he said, voice rough. "Finally. I thought, when you collapsed." He held her, with his good arm, face pressed briefly, into her hair. "I thought I'd lost you, before we'd even started. Takes more than that." Months passed like something learning to breathe again. Celia helped Rosa run the boarding house. Learned better Spanish. Learned to cook food that was not her own, but became hers anyway, the way so much of this new life kept becoming hers, without asking permission first. Hawk found work as a scout for local traders, his skill quickly making him indispensable, well paid, respected in a way that had nothing to do with where he had been born, and everything to do with what he could do. Tarak attached himself to Hawk, learning everything the older man could teach him, absorbing it with the fierce, unrelenting focus of a boy who had already lost everything once, and refused to be caught unprepared again. It was late in the 2nd month, on a morning bright and ordinary, that dogs began barking at the settlement's edge in a different key entirely, and a small ragged group came walking in off the eastern trail. Celia was hanging wash, when she saw them, and for a moment her hands simply stopped, clothespin still pinched between her fingers, because one of the women walking at the front of that group moved, with a stride she would have known blind, at any distance, in any light. Sinopa. Beside her, thinner than before, her scowl worn down by exhaustion, into something almost gentle, walked Ayanna. Celia was running, before she had decided to run. Sinopa caught her by the shoulders, when she reached them, held her out at arm's length the way she always had, studying her the way a rancher studies a horse, and then, for the first time in the whole of their acquaintance, pulled her into an embrace that nearly knocked the both of them over. "We heard you were here," Sinopa said, gruff even now. "From traitors. From people who talk too much." "I thought you were dead," Celia said, into her shoulder, unable to stop the words from shaking. "I thought everyone was dead." "Not everyone," Ayanna said, and her voice cracked on it despite the old scowl still trying to hold its ground on her face. "Ashki did not come with us." The words landed soft and final. "He held the gap," Sinopa said. "Gave us the time to run. There is no shame in that kind of dying. Only grief." Celia closed her eyes. Held both women tighter. "He was the first person here who ever looked at me and told the truth, even when it wasn't kind." "That was Ashki," Ayanna said. "Always." They stayed. Not in Rosa's house, though Rosa would have made room, but nearby, close enough that Celia could walk to Sinopa's fire most evenings, and sit while the old woman worked a new basket and complained, at length, about how slow Celia still was at everything. It was one evening in early spring, nearly a year now, since a doctor had ridden into a ranch yard, with news that changed everything, that a letter arrived which would finish what the ledger had started. It came addressed to her in careful, familiar handwriting. Dr. Renner. Celia's hands shook opening it. "Mrs. Hale," it began, and even that address struck something raw in her, the name still clinging on long, after the marriage it belonged to had burned down to nothing. "I write with news I should have shared with you long before your departure. Some months after you were taken from the ranch, I was called to attend to a fever in the household of a land clerk in Prescott. In his delirium, he spoke at length of certain arrangements involving your husband, a transfer of dowry acreage predating his second marriage, structured to appear as though initiated at your own request, though you had, by his own admission, never signed any such document. There is more, and it is graver still. A soldier who served under Captain Reyes came to me this winter for treatment of a wound he would not properly explain. In his own fevered talk, much like the clerk before him, he spoke of orders received, before any hunting party was ever attacked, orders naming a boundary, and a time, arranged, he believed, through correspondence between your former husband and the fort itself. I have his sworn statement, as well, taken once he was lucid and willing. I have obtained copies of both. I believe, combined with your own account, and whatever you observed firsthand, this constitutes sufficient grounds to bring the whole matter before the territorial court, both the land and the lives lost defending it. I am sorry it has taken me this long to act. I was afraid, and fear is a poor excuse for silence, but it is the only one I have to offer you. If you are willing, I will stand as witness." Celia sat with the letter a long time. Because for months she had carried that single line in the ledger like a splinter she could not quite work loose, transfer pending, CH status, and beside it, buried but never forgotten, Hawk's cold certainty on a ridge above a burning barn, that someone had told the soldiers exactly where and when to find blood. Now she had proof of both. Real proof, sworn and documented, sitting in a letter in her own trembling hands. She found Hawk, that evening at the corral, mending a bridle by lamplight. "I want to go back," she said. "Not to stay. To finish something." He looked up. Studied her face a long moment, before he understood what she meant. The ledger. Renner has proof now. Of the land. And of something worse. Her voice was steadier than she felt. He didn't just throw me away, Hawk. He built a war to cover a theft, and people died, so that no one would ever think to ask why. And you want him answered for it. I want the truth told, she said. In a room where it counts. Not with fire this time. With facts. Something in Hawk's face shifted, not surprise, she realized. Recognition. Like he had been waiting for her to arrive at exactly this decision on her own. Then we go, he said. Together. The territorial court sat in a squat adobe building, that smelled of dust, and old paper, and Celia walked into it that autumn wearing a plain dress Rosa had made her spine straighter than it had been in years. Garrett was already seated at the front, thinner than she remembered, older in the face in a way that had nothing to do with the calendar. Beside him sat Lila, a small, quiet infant now cradled against her shoulder, born some months back, if the whispers among the gallery were to be believed, healthy and loud, and entirely unaware of the wreckage his arrival sat in the middle of. Dr. Renner took the stand first. Laid out the ledger, the sworn statement, from the delirious land clerk, the timeline that placed the transfers planning months before any diagnosis, months before any canyon, months before 3 rifle shots had cracked the morning open. Then he laid out the second statement. The soldier's confession, halting on the page, but unmistakable in its meaning, that orders naming a time and a place had reached the fort, before any hunting party had crossed any line, orders that could only have come from someone who wanted a war to happen on schedule. Garrett's attorney fought both, of course. Called the first hearsay. Called the second the ravings of a man who had taken a fever and a bad wound, and stitched them into a story that made him feel important. Then the judge called Lila Prescott Hale to the stand. Celia watched her rise, watched her hand the sleeping infant off to a waiting relative, before crossing the room, with the careful, deliberate steps of a woman carrying more than one kind of weight, and felt something twist hard in her chest, that was not quite triumph, and was not quite grief. Something closer to recognition. Mrs. Hale, the attorney for the territory, said gently. Did your husband ever discuss the acreage in question with you? Before your marriage? Lila was quiet a long moment. Her eyes flicked once, briefly, to Celia. Held there. Yes, she said finally, voice steady despite everything it must have cost her. He told me the land would come to our son. He said it was already arranged. Before we married. Before I even knew there had been another wife at all. A murmur moved, through the room like wind, through dry grass. And did you know, the attorney pressed, that this arrangement predated any formal end to his first marriage? Lila's chin lifted. I know now. And the matter of the fort, the attorney continued. Did your husband ever speak of an understanding with Captain Reyes? Before the attack on the hunting party. Something flickered across Lila's face, fear, maybe, or simple exhaustion at finally being allowed to say a thing she had been carrying alone. He said once, she answered slowly, that Reyes owed him a favor, and that the favor would come due soon, and that afterward no one would ever question how quickly the land settled back into his name. I did not understand what he meant. Not then. She did not look at Garrett, as she said it. She looked at Celia. And something passed between the two of them in that look, not friendship, not quite, they were still strangers bound by nothing, but one burning house, and one shared understanding of exactly what it cost to be seen, as useful only for what you could produce. But it was enough. It was more than enough. The verdict came 3 weeks later, delivered by letter to Rosa's boarding house. The transfer was voided. The acreage returned, in full, to Celia's name. And the court, having reviewed the ledger, the soldier's sworn statement, and the testimony of Garrett's own second wife, referred the matter to a federal inquiry, into conspiracy between a private citizen and a commissioned officer, an inquiry that would, over the following year, cost Captain Reyes his commission, and cost Garrett Hale nearly everything else he had left standing. He did not go to prison. The frontier rarely worked that cleanly, and Celia had learned, by then, not to expect clean endings, from a world built on so many careless beginnings. But he lost the ranch. Lost the name that had once meant something in that territory. Lost, in the end, exactly the legacy he had traded a wife and a war trying to secure. Celia read the letter twice. Then folded it, set it aside, and did not read it a third time. Because it was finished. And she found, somewhat to her own surprise, that finished was enough. She did not need to watch him suffer to feel the weight finally lift. She only needed to know the truth had been said out loud, in a room that mattered, by people who could no longer pretend not to have heard it. Hawk asked her to marry him by the river that ran past the settlement, on an ordinary evening, with no ceremony to it at all. "I've been thinking," he said, turning her hand over in his, "that we should make this official. The us part." She laughed. "That's your idea of a proposal?" "I'm not good with pretty words. You know that." He faced her fully. "But I know I want to wake up beside you for the rest of my life. No, I want to build something with you. A home. Maybe a family, if that's still something you want." Her breath caught. "I can't carry children. You know that too. I know you can't give birth." His voice stayed even, certain. "That isn't the same thing." He gestured back toward the settlement, toward Turok, who had all but adopted them both, toward Sinopa's fire still burning steady 100 yards off, toward the handful of women who had begun arriving quietly at Rosa's door over the past months, fleeing situations Celia recognized in her bones. "There's more than one way to build a family." She kissed him. Long certain. Full of every promise she intended to keep. They married a month later in a ceremony, as simple as the proposal had been, no priest, just an old man, who spoke the binding words in Spanish and Apache and broken English. The whole settlement gathered to watch. Turok stood as witness, grinning wide enough to nearly split his face in two. Sinopa wept, loudly, and denied it just as loudly the moment anyone dared to mention it. That night, lying beside Hawk in the small house they had built together at the edge of the settlement, Celia thought back, over the whole long road that had brought her here. The trade that had felt, at the time, like the end of everything. The months of brutal labor that had forged her into someone she had not recognized, and had slowly, painfully, come to respect. The war she had helped set in motion, and the lives it had cost, weights she would carry the rest of her days, without ever fully setting them down. The fever. The flight west. The courtroom, and the truth finally spoken, where it could no longer be buried in a locked study. She would not have chosen any of it. But she would not, given the chance, undo it either. Because every hard mile, every wrong turn, every choice made in fear, or fury or desperate hope, had carried her here. To this house. To this man. To a life built, from nothing but her own two hands, and the people willing to stand beside her, while she built it. "You're thinking too loud again," Hawk murmured, half asleep. "Sorry." "About what?" "How far we've come." She turned to face him in the dark. "How far there still is to go." "We'll make it. No hesitation in it at all. We've already survived worse than whatever comes next." He was probably right. Outside, a coyote called to the rising moon. Another answered, farther off, and the sound was lonely, and wild and, somehow, exactly right. Celia closed her eyes, and let it carry her toward sleep. The woman Garrett Hale had traded away in a red canyon, one scorching morning, that felt now like it belonged to somebody else's life entirely, was gone. Not erased. Not forgotten. Simply outgrown, the way a snake outgrows a skin it no longer needs. What remained was only Celia. No husband's name required to explain her. No ledger, no ranch, no verdict of barren, or broken or unworthy attached anywhere to who she was. Just herself. Rough in places. Whole in the places that mattered. And free.